we've done all the underpinnings. We've had a moment of reflection with Dave on dealing with the very big. And now we've started to talk about video, which I'm sure many of the people who are tuned in have come to focus on. And at this stage, I am going to ask JT to appear on the microphone. If you're out there, JT, are you there?
I'm here.
Brilliant, JT, good to see you. So JT runs the Streaming Video Alliance. He's going to introduce himself and talk a little bit about that in a minute. But what I like to do at this point, because there are so many people who are interested in video delivery, who come to Content Delivery Summit because of the heritage of streaming media, it's really good to have people who are really focused on the video technology issues come and talk about the specifics of what's current, what's hot, and what's not. So, JT, I'm going to hand to you for the next hour. You can talk to us a little bit about the SVA and then a quick word from one of our sponsors, and then we're going to go into.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Thanks, Tom. I mean, this is great. And what I'll do is I'm going to share some slides, going to walk through the SVA and really sort of talk about what's happening with open caching.
Your microphone's playing up a little bit. I don't know if you can give it a quick, a bit crackling.
Okay.
Cool.
All right, let me share my screen. So here we go. All right. Okay, everybody. So again, thanks for taking the time to listen to this.
JT, it's still really JT. It's still really crackling.
All right. Hold on a second. Of course, technical difficulties. All right. I have problems with Zoom being a pain in the butt. So.
Hey JT, it's Tim. You could call in on a phone and actually do the audio that way.
That's a great idea. Okay, let me do that. Hold on one second. Sorry about that, guys.
What we'll do while JT's reconnecting then, Tim, since I heard your voice just then, are you there?
I am. Hang on a second. Let me
flick the camera on until JT says he's ready.
All right, there we go.
Are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Go on. Tell us what your favorite thing that Dave just talked about in the Netflix retrospective.
Well, I still want to understand, and I don't really understand how they talked everybody with those peering points into actually putting those boxes in. Because I remember it was a huge controversy, with the incumbent saying, well, we're going to charge you, et cetera, et cetera. And then suddenly it's like it disappeared and now everybody wants to do what Netflix did. So yeah, that to me, I missed maybe where he said why they accepted it, but it was fascinating to realize that that's now part of ancient history for those of us in the streaming space, which is really
cool. I see JT back, so we did a little tap dance for you, JT. Are you there? Can we hear you? Let's have a listen. He's still looking at the screen. Audio delivery expert.
Anyway, so what about you? What was your most interesting thing that you talked about there?
I think I think it sort of sounded like they got their team right at the beginning. They had vision and they saw the opportunity and made it happen. And I think one of the things that's really exciting in this space is when you get the right team in and they have that right vision, they can deliver. And I think teams that don't have that self-conviction sometimes trip up. And I think that team, the team that Dave was involved with, clearly had that vision and had that foresight and took it slowly but got it right, which I think, well, slowly in some terms, but they got it right, and I think that was important. So.
Okay, JT, I'm back on the phone.
That's a little bit of a lip sync problem, but we can hear you fine, so let's go for it. Over to JT.
Yes. Again, I have a lot of problems with Zoom. It's just not my friend anymore. Okay, so let me do a screen share again. Let's get the slides up. And again, thanks, Tom. I really appreciate you having me here. So we're going to talk a little bit about the SVA, just really quick overview. Obviously, you guys can have the slides after the event. And then the thing is we're going to talk a lot about open caching, right? So where is open caching today? What does it mean to the industry? I'm going to give you a brief overview on sort of what it is and the state of it. And then we'll go to a sponsor message, and then we'll move into a panel with a bunch of guys to talk about open caching and kind of what it means to the industry, why it's important. And I think that's important to understand. So, all right, getting started, a little bit about the Alliance, just some data points. We're about 90 member companies plus right now. We've got a lot of documents published. We hold meetings every year. So we're very much like other industry associations or technology consortia. We're very much like IETF and CTA and SMPTE and all those folks. In terms of what drives us, like why does the SBA exist? What are our goals? Our first goals are, learning, right? We want to educate the industry. We want to make sure everyone is talking about the same challenges. Sustainability, right? We want to talk not only about, how do we make sure that this growth in streaming is sustainable, from a business perspective and a technology perspective, but also environmentally. In terms of diversity, we are, committed to diversity within the industry. We want to focus on allowing underrepresented voices, whether they, be from specific cultures or genders, within the conversations that are happening. Collaboration, we obviously focus on collaboration. That's what our working groups are for. Everyone comes to the table. Everyone's invited. No opinions are dismissed. Everyone comes to work on solving the issue. And that leads to solutions, right? That's what we're after. We're after solving the big problems in the industry. And that has to be a collaborative effort. It can't be a top-down approach. It has to be bottom-up. And then innovation, right? We're focused on innovation. We actually have a grant program for startups every year to bring in companies that are out on the bleeding edge, that they're experimenting with different ways to deliver or different ways to encode or different ways to package. And they become part, again, of that conversation that eventually leads to the solution. So these are our core tenets, and this is what drives the organization. And you can see here sort of, what do we do on top of those pillars? We obviously give everything away, right? Everything that's been ratified by our members is free to the industry. You don't have to be a member to download a spec. You don't have to be a member to download code when that's ratified. It'll just be there for you. And then obviously, we have, lots of meetings and events. Not only do we have our member meetings, which are 3 times a year, but we also have stream ups now. It's a kitschy little marketing name for just meetups, right? We have 4 meetups a year around the world. And those usually feature a few presentations and some fun trivia and a lot of conversation. But again, these are things that we are giving away to the industry. They're free to come to. They don't cost anything. And when we go back to physical, we'll have those events physical as well, and they will be free as well. Our member meetings, of course, are only available to members. And then we're also talking about launching a university where, again, we will offer some course material for free. And then lastly is publishing, of course, right? We build on those pillars by writing specs, by writing docs, best practices, functional requirements, whatever we can to help the industry solve those critical challenges. In terms of our membership, yeah, again, you can just see this big smattering of logos. It's great. We have, participation from across the ecosystem, right? We've got network operators, we have content rights holders, we have technology vendors, and we have service providers. Everyone is coming to play, and it's fantastic. And so, this is always changing and growing. You can go on our website and check out the members, that you want. We also have a lot of what we call participating brands. So, of course, there's been consolidation. Bigger companies consolidate with others, they merge, they purchase. And the way that our bylaws work is we allow those smaller brands or those acquired brands or those subsidiary brands to participate for free as well. So they come underneath the members sort of umbrella. And you can see here, so Amazon's a member, we have folks from Prime Video, folks from Twitch, Viacom CBS, so we have folks from, the old folks from CBS Interactive, which is now changed. But you can see how this kind of works, right? Pluto TV. All these people are invited to come and participate as part of their relationship with a member company. In terms of our working groups, we got a bunch. We really, again, are spanning the ecosystem, everything from, advertising to, again, open caching, obviously, measurement, security, players playback, VR 360. And of course, we're always considering new working groups, like what should we add now? We're talking about, should we add something around edge compute, right? So Dave talked about that a little bit in his fireside chat with Dom. An important thing now, and it's going to make a difference in streaming, especially as 5G ultra wideband gets lit up in more places. We're going to see more of a reason to have some of those functionalities pushed out to the edge in serverless fashion, right? So they started out as Lambda, now they're moving deeper, into the mist and fog. So we're looking at working groups to address that, or AI and ML. Again, as new technologies come into the ecosystem, we'll be looking at them. Okay, so let's get to the meat of this, right? It's what is open caching? So open caching is something that the SBA is known for. This is one of the topics that was sort of there at the genesis of the organization almost 6 years ago. And although we have extended what the SBA means in many ways, open caching still serves as a kernel of what we're about, which is the interoperability and democratization of caching. Right? We know that you can go set up caches anywhere, but people don't use a single caching provider or a CDN, right? So ultimately a CDN as a delivery network is a caching provider. So people don't use just one caching provider, use multiple networks. And the problem with that then becomes is how do I link all these things together, right? If I need to purge content from one, I need to purge them from all. How do I do that quickly? How do I do that easily? I need to spin up new nodes across my delivery architecture, which includes my own CDN, all the commercial CDNs I use, and some of the CDNs that are in MNOs, right? So I have to do this in a way that makes sense for me. Open caching is about that. It's not a new type of cache or a new cache technology. It's about interoperability. So it's an API-based caching system that allows for management, from everything from capacity understanding, right? How much capacity do I have across all of my CDN partners, to configuration management, to logging. How can I bring all the logs from all my CDNs into a single place, right? Instead of having to get them all from their own little visualization tools or pulling them in manually, I need to do that programmatically. So you can see here that, this is just some basic summary of what open caching is. In terms of how it works, right, they're really sort of kind of three fundamental components, right? There's a request router, there's a caching plane, and there's an open caching node. Those are ultimately the three components. And now, obviously, there are lots of APIs that are connected in between those components. In terms of what it looks like from, really kind of an operational standpoint, this is a diagram that best describes it. And I'll give a hint, this diagram actually is appearing and will appear very shortly on an open caching microsite. And I'll mention that in a little bit, but we are spinning up a website attached to the streamingvideoalliance.org that explains everything about open caching, provides all of the materials, all the specs, all the current projects, all the people operating in it, everything in one place. So you don't have to go search for it. You would just go to this microsite. And this diagram here is obviously central to it. So you can see the relationship between really what is the content delivery network, right? The content provider and the service provider. So these are all sort of mixed in together. And it's important to understand that as an organization, we are a technical consortia. We don't deal with the business aspect of this sort of traffic distribution, right? So people can say like, well, if I put open caching nodes in my network and I'm working with the content provider or the streaming platform operator, why do I need a CDN? You do, right? So the CDN is still intrinsic to the delivery, especially for off-network traffic. And so they all have to work together. But there are business relationships that need to be ironed out between everybody, right? So to the CDN, it's like, well, if I'm delivering some of the traffic you would be delivering, shouldn't I take some of the revenue from what you're getting from that content provider? Those are things that we don't deal with, right? We are just dealing with the technical specifications. So you'll see some numbers down here in sort of the SP land. And then in between CDN and SP on the left-hand side, those refer to these, right? These are our specifications to date that have been published. And obviously there are a whole host of documents and projects that are in flight. The way that the organization works is we do not release any documents to the public until they have been ratified. So that's the entire membership looks at it, comments on it, it goes back for review, it gets finalized, it moves to the board, it gets reviewed again, it gets finalized. It goes back to the membership for a final vote. And once we have quorum with approval, it goes onto the website and we start talking about it and it becomes available. So these are the documents, the specs that have become available. And obviously there will be more coming this year. I mean, right now, I think we have slated 3 or 4 open caching related documents to be published. So this list will grow. And again, all those documents will go onto the SVA website, as well as the open caching microsite when it's launched next month. So just to give you kind of a sense of, really where things are at in terms of the open caching working group. This is a working group. Normally working groups have a project and they work on that project, once every couple of weeks. Open caching has 3 working group calls. So this is how busy this working group is. And you can see that they've got 6 fully published specs, 4 in draft, and there are more coming, right? There is a constant flow of work that's being done, especially as we've launched labs. And I'll talk about that in just a second. But you've got a white paper with an overview. It needs a little updating, but you can see how things are connected together. And then you've got participants from across the delivery ecosystem that are involved, right? So you've got lots of companies, again, all of our member companies. From them, we have a host who are very active in the open caching working group. So they are really looking at and intrinsically involved in what's happening. So let's talk about how do we move beyond documentation? And that gets us to sort of labs, right? In terms of looking forward, obviously we're looking at more specs and updates to existing specs. For example, we launched a request routing spec. I think it was 2017. We just updated that, right, to include manifest rewrites because that's where the industry had gone. And that's what the industry needed in terms of using a request routing functionality within a caching delivery system. So that's been updated. We call it request routing 2.0. That's on the website, but that's what happens, right? So specs will be developed, but they'll also be updated. In addition to that, we're doing real sort of codification of those specs into code. Now, part of the problem has been you get a doc and you look at it and you're like, so how do I build an open caching node? The doc defines it, but it doesn't define really sort of the how. Well, you know, how should my API work? Should it be REST-based? What should I do? Where should I start? So that was the idea behind labs, right? Codify the specs so that everyone can go and get some reference code, and maybe that reference code's in multiple languages, right? Maybe it's in C++, maybe it's in Java, maybe it's in Python. You know, whatever people feel like developing. But once we ratify that, right? Obviously, the repo will be public, so it can be forked. So lots of people will be doing different things with it, and we hope that that will come back into the fold so that our member companies can look at changes that other people have made to the code and incorporate those in future versions. And obviously, there's real-world deployments. I'm going to talk about some of those. People are implementing open caching. There's all of a sudden, say within the past 6 months, there has been a real demand to get something built, you know, especially operator networks wanting to utilize open caching. And I'll explain why. And when we get to the panel will really sort of, you know, dig into, you know, why are people implementing this? Why is it important? So SVA Labs, there is a reference slide at the end of this deck. Again, it's got some URLs in it. One of those is to Labs, and it's really just labs.streamingvideoalliance.org. But this is really sort of taking, you know, what's been written in a document and implementing it in some fashion. And obviously, again, the gist of open caching is APIs, right? That's the language that it speaks is API. And so what we're developing right now are the fundamental components of open caching, which are a lot of those APIs. So if you just kind of take a look at sort of, you know, what we're trying to do, again, it's reference code, it's testing. We have talked about concepts of certification. So back to that sort of public repo, forking code. Now it's like, well, somebody's come up with a really awesome version of this. We can fold it back in, or maybe we could just certify it. And then there's, you know, sort of that in terms of licensing, it's all MIT open source, right? Just like all of our other resources, we give it away. That's the point, right? The SBA is not about licensing. It's not about revenue generation. We are a not-for-profit organization whose mission is to improve streaming. It's right. It's to help everybody deliver the highest quality streaming at scale. And so to do that, we give this stuff away. In terms of current labs projects, so obviously these are just what's being worked on in open caching. We have other labs projects that are being worked on in other groups. But in terms of the first one, sort of configuration interface, this is a big one, right? It's how do you manage your caching nodes across different providers? So this is a three-part problem that they're solving, and it's really about you know, kind of giving a harness, right? How do you connect all these things together? The capacity footprint API really builds off CDNI, and actually configuration interface does as well. And I'll explain our relationship with IETF in a second. And then you've got the configuration integration API. So again, there's lots of actual coding being done. There are member companies. I think we have right now 65 or 70 GitHub seats that are being utilized by member companies as they're actively working on either documentation or code, you know, or other aspects. And hopefully, keep my fingers crossed, you know, that sometime this year we will ratify our first project, and we will open that up for the public, you know, to start building off and forking and using. You know, in terms of that configuration interface, I think this is really important to talk about this because, again, it builds off of what CDNI has already done. Open caching builds off of a lot of what CDNI has done. And there was a reason for that, right? Sort of CDNI got to a point and then kind of stopped moving forward. But the industry was changing. And so the needs were changing in terms of what caching had to do. Again, multi-CDN configuration architectures. Open caching builds upon that, and it's actually going backwards now, right? So we are not only building on CDNI, but we are contributing back to that group. So there are multiple RFCs that the SBA has authored that have become part of the CDNI working group, and that's fantastic. And as a matter of fact, we are going to be working very, very closely, with CDNI in the future, right? So one of our open caching members is now one of their co-chairs of the CDNI group. So we hope there's going to be a very strong collaboration between the two organizations as we develop and move forward in terms of how CDNI works versus how open caching works. They need to work together. We can't have competing things in the industry. It doesn't help anybody. Understand the configuration interface. So you can, again, just take the doc, look at this, but you can see the sort of layers in terms of how they're approaching this, right? You've got specs. So all this stuff has been written. These are the things that need to be written. Some of them are IETF, some of them are SVA. You get into sort of the capabilities. What do these specs do? Like, what do they define? What is the functionality they're meant to cover? And then you've got the APIs themselves, right? The actual codification of those capabilities based on those specifications. And that's really what sort of that configuration interface project is really trying to accomplish. So again, this collaboration with the IETF, you can see some of the RFCs that we've been authoring to sort of push CDNI forward and create a much more, call it synergy between open caching. And again, the cool thing is this would be really frightening to the industry if open caching, you had to license it. People are going like, oh my God, what is going on here? But that's, again, not the point, right? Everything's free. No one makes any money off this except the people implement it and charge for it. What we're doing and what IETF is doing is we're defining the way that this will happen, that this can happen. And there is no one size fits all. There's no one way to do this. Open caching will be implemented in lots of different ways, and it already has been. So, that's also good to see. And we will continue iterating on that. And hopefully those implementations will, because they're based on CDNI or open caching, will incorporate those new things as they come out, and remain sort of at the current state of the technology as it's being defined by the two organizations. In terms of extending open caching, this is actually the coolest thing. I love this project. This is called the Home Storage Open Caching Node. This is about pushing the open caching principles down into the home and ultimately to the device. So this is where we start talking about mist and fog, right? You push that cache down to a home gateway. So now all of a sudden, maybe you're pre-positioning content during off-peak time. So again, you're utilizing your network better, and people are being able to stream the content they want in 4K UHD, right, or 4K HDR from their home, right? No longer, you don't have to backhaul that streaming. And so that radically reduces things, especially when we're not talking about multicast, we're talking about unicast, but we can multicast in the home. So all of this is being considered as this group, which is our edge storage subgroup, it's part of open caching, as they define the specification about what it means. And we have some really cool companies involved with this, right? Some of the storage guys, right? Kioxia, Western Digital, they obviously see an opportunity here, of course, business opportunity, but regardless, there's plenty of NAS products on the market that are consumer or prosumer stuff. People are plugging them in all the time. Why can't we use those as part of an open caching delivery infrastructure? And again, everything's API based, so the content rights holder or the streaming provider has the ability to manage that as part of the overall delivery architecture, which could then lead to some interesting, delivery improvements like around P2P, right? Can we use open caching for live? Yes. We're pre-positioning content to the home. Great. Okay, can that just be like can that just be a seed? Can we just seed that as a peer? So there's lots of cool things that might happen in the future, but this is what we need to do, is extend open caching down to the device itself and into the fog and mist. Now, we did do a proof of concept, and again, we'll talk a little bit about implementation, but the proof of concept, it showed that open caching performs at or better than normal caching. And that's the key thing there, is it's not worse, because that's what's important. If companies were just looking at performance, maybe be like, open caching, who cares? Like, I've already got Squid, I've already got Nginx, like I'm good. But it doesn't, it provides more than benefits, right? It's all about management. So not only do you get at, equal, or better performance, you also get, you get this management tool that allows you to look across all of your delivery infrastructure at all of your caches at the same time. And that POC information, that's available on our website, and we will be having another POC very soon as well. In terms of implementation, I've got a couple minutes left here before we kick off to the panel. adoption is happening. Quilt and Cisco have started driving this in the market. So you probably saw the announcement with British Telecom, Telecom Argentina. They have adopted the Quilt Cisco solution that is open caching compliant. It's open caching based. But in addition to that, right, so Disney Streaming, they have been using open caching nodes in the Verizon network in production, right? And just anecdotally, what they've seen is sometimes even better performance than other caches. So again, one could argue, once you strip out all that stuff, sometimes there's a lot of software layer overhead in the existing caches. Once you get really down to the nitty gritty and it's all programmatic, one might be able to argue that that would lead to, ultimately to better performance of that cache. But regardless, that's what's happening. They're using it. You've got BT that really is getting open caching down into the edge to improve performance of delivery. And then Viasat. So 2 years ago, Viasat announced that they were building an open caching implementation, and they're going to partner with Thibeault to provide basically content on the plane. COVID, obviously, they put a crimp on those plans, but they deployed it. Hopefully, they're going to be speaking at our Q3, Q4 member meeting about data. So they actually have production data that they've been collecting to be able to show how has open caching improved the overall experience related to this. So you can just sort of see, like, these are some of why BT wanted to get open caching into their network. I'm not going to go through these. You can read these on your own, but it's important to know that it's not just about performance. It's also about management, flexibility, accessibility, those things that are related to a more efficient way to manage overall delivery, amongst all the caching providers. So again, this myriad of additional benefits, we'll talk about this in the panel, right? So it's standardization, everything's working the same way, about consistency. These things are kind of, really common sense, right? If you make everything API based, well, then nothing's proprietary, right? It's all open, right? I can get to it and I can take from it in a way that is the same across any cache. That makes management so much easier, right? You're not like building middleware to do things anymore. You're just using what's available there, and it's all the same calls, right? So you're not building, again, different software for different API implementations. It's all the same implementation. All right, so what's next really quickly? We're obviously working on bringing on more CDNs. We want them to participate. We do have a lot of them. We obviously don't have Akamai yet. We've been talking to Akamai for a while. That's those issues are not related to specifically to open caching. They're more about the way our organization is structured in relationship to our intellectual property rights sort of guidelines and the way we operate with that. We're obviously building out a lot of reference code. We'll see new POCs. They're underway. Again, that sort of edge storage and the IETF. We are really working with them to make sure that we can, again, develop and co-develop this technology for interoperable, open, flexible caches, so that there's just one in the industry. It's not multiple flavors. References. So you get the slide deck, go to some of these URLs. You'll find lots of information. Again, you'll see an announcement about the open caching microsite in June. And then you can go to that, and that's sort of, that'll be soup to nuts. Everything you need to know about open caching, everything you want to get about open caching, specs, code, whatever, it'll all be there. And with that said,